Healthcare. It's something most of us believe we need. Many of us are convinced we need to go to the doctor for everything that has to do with our health, no matter how trivial the problem. Certainly this makes sense for accidents and other traumas, with modern medicine having developed some of the most amazing life-saving care. But emergency medicine is only part of the bigger healthcare picture. The question is, on the whole, is modern medicine, what many call healthcare, really the miraculous system that most of us believe it is? Let's look at one of the best measures of the health of a society, life expectancy. Life expectancy is the average lifespan of an individual in a group, or basically what age you're likely to die on average. In 1900, life expectancy in the United States was 47.3 years, reaching 69.7 years by 1960, a positive increase of 22.4 years, an impressive 47% rise over those 60 years. From 1960 over the next 60 years, life expectancy reached 78.8 years in 2019, a much smaller positive change of 9.1 years, or a 13% increase. Unfortunately, from 2009 until 2019, peaking in 2014, progress in life expectancy has essentially flatlined at 78.7 years, with virtually no real gain over those 11 years. How much does this massive medical system cost? The gross domestic product, or GDP for short, is a monetary measure of the market value of all the final goods and services produced in a specific period by a country. In 1900, the United States national health expenditure was 2.5% of GDP, doubling to 5% by 1960. After 1960, national health expenditure began to rapidly climb, reaching 17.6% by 2019, a staggering 252% increase with no end in sight to the ceaseless growth in healthcare costs. Since 1960, over the last 60 years, the healthcare bill has amounted to $66.7 trillion, with just about half that amount, $33.7 trillion, spent during those 11 years of zero gain in life expectancy. The medical system is extremely costly and growing, with little to no impact on life expectancy in recent years. What may be surprising is that any gains in life expectancy over the last 120 plus years are not primarily because of modern medicine. A 1970s paper by McKinley found that medical measures and services only accounted for, at most, 3.5% of the decline in mortality from 1900 to 1973. Furthermore, according to a 2001 report by John Bunker in the International Journal of Epidemiology, quote, all told, clinical services composed of preventative services as well as therapeutic intervention we credit with 5 or 5.5 years of the 30-year increase in life expectancy since 1900. I estimate there's a loss of life expectancy of 6 months or possibly as many as 12 months as a result of iatrogenic or medically caused death. According to Bunker, taking into account his estimate of medically caused death, we are left with a medical system that can be credited with 4 to 5 years of the total improvement in life expectancy. However, the Bunker study assumed a lower end of medical error, 75,000 to 150,000, that resulted in death. But according to a 2016 article in the British Medical Journal, medical error contributes to 251,000 deaths and is the third leading cause of death. This brings that medicine-caused disease loss to perhaps 1.5 years, which changes the possible life expectancy gain attributed to medicine to 3.5 to 4.0 years, or about 11% to 14% of the total improved life expectancy over the 20th century. Whatever the exact percentage that medical measures have increased life expectancy, the vast amount had to do with other non-medical factors, yet the public attributes 80% of the improvement to modern medicine and only 20% to all other factors. Piped water, sewage treatment, garbage collection, food transportation and storage, electricity, better housing, labor and child labor laws, economic prosperity, education, pollution controls, improved nutrition, exercise, and so forth were actually the main factors in improved life expectancy, not modern medicine. Is there a better way to live a full and long life? A study in 2018 in the journal Circulation looked at the impact of 5 lifestyle factors of never smoking, a normal body mass index or BMI, 30 plus minutes a day of moderate to vigorous physical activity, moderate alcohol intake, and a high diet quality score on life expectancy. They found, quote, we estimate that adherence to 5 low-risk lifestyle-related factors could prolong life expectancy at age 50 by 14.0 and 12.2 years for female and male U.S. adults compared to individuals who adopted 0 low-risk lifestyle factor. A 2020 study in PLOS Medicine examined the life expectancy of healthy versus unhealthy people based on 4 lifestyle factors of leisure time physical activity, smoking, diet, and alcohol consumption. They found, quote, our results indicate that in participants with the healthiest lifestyle score at 45 years, the average life expectancy was about 7.6 years longer in men and 6.5 years longer in women compared to those reporting the lowest lifestyle score. These and other studies show that a healthier lifestyle is associated with an average gain of 10 years in life expectancy, with every reason to believe this number could be much higher. This means that lifestyle modification far exceeds the benefits of modern medicine in improving longevity and no doubt a tiny fraction of the cost of trillions of dollars currently being spent. The focus on prevention at the personal level far exceeds attempting to remedy problems after the fact with costly and frequently dangerous and deadly medical interventions. Prevention should be a top priority for national health policy with positive lifestyle education and preventive care as the primary part of a genuine healthcare system. As a society, we are deeply invested in the myth that medicine has drastically increased human lifespan and will continue to do so. The medical industry heavily markets its importance and aggressively pushes treating illness over preventing it with lifestyle modification. The industry relies on the notion that humans are lazy, preferring to take pills rather than exercise, eat properly, and other positive disease prevention measures. The media plays a significant role in causing this misperception. Television programs dramatize and glamorize the world of modern medicine and portray healthcare as having extraordinary powers to restore health. Television dramas seldom communicate to viewers that environmental factors, poverty, housing, food insecurity, education or social welfare, diet, and exercise are powerful predictors of health. A 2022 opinion piece in the British Medical Journal states that we live with an illusion of evidence-based medicine. The authors declare that the pharmaceutical industry's responsibility is to its shareholders, which means that priority must be given to their hierarchical power structures, product loyalty, and public relations propaganda over scientific integrity. Their focus is not on your health. Quote, the release into the public domain of previously confidential pharmaceutical industry documents has given the medical community valuable insight into the degree to which the industry-sponsored clinical trials are misrepresented. Until this problem is corrected, evidence-based medicine will remain an illusion. A science of real integrity would be one in which practitioners are careful not to cling to cherished hypotheses and take seriously the outcomes of the most stringent experiments. This ideal is, however, threatened by corporations in which financial interests trump the common good. Medicine is largely dominated by a small number of very large pharmaceutical companies that compete for market share but are effectively united in their efforts to expanding that market. Scientific progress is thwarted by the ownership of data and knowledge because industry suppresses negative trial results, fails to report adverse events, and does not share raw data with the academic research community. Patients die because of the adverse impact of commercial interests on the research agenda, universities, and regulators.
What concerns me is that a significant minority of drugs that have been approved by FDA have been approved over the FDA's own medical reviewers' objections on safety grounds. And the FDA's whole system of drug review is bogus. It's designed to protect and advance the interests of the drug industry. A lot of people don't realize this, but FDA never tests the drugs it approves. FDA does no independent testing at all. It relies entirely on the testing done by the drug advocate, the proponent of the drug application, that has a self-interest and a conflict of interest, that party is looked to for all of the drug testing. They do their own testing. There have been multiple instances of corruption in this process where false information or negative information has been kept away from the FDA so that the FDA will approve a drug. In fact, Sanofi-Aventis, with its drug Keytec, relied principally on a clinical trial that FDA's medical reviewers, who are sharp on the case, discovered didn't even happen. They said that a clinical trial that they presented that provided support for the claims for Keytec, which is a super antibiotic, was a principal justification for the application. The medical reviewers looked at it and found it never happened. They made it up. And there were FBI investigations and prosecutions. But what did the FDA do? The medical reviewers said to the commissioner, gee, they relied on a fraud for this application. We should deny it. But the FDA commissioner granted it. He put Keytec into the market. And many of the indications for Keytec came out of the clinical trial that was bogus. So you see, it's that degree of influence and corruption that makes it impossible for the American people to be protected.
The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, is the agency that regulates big pharmaceutical companies, and it's funded by those same big pharmaceutical companies. Can you see any potential problems in the FDA being funded by the big pharma companies that it's regulating? The FDA has moved from an entirely taxpayer-funded entity to one increasingly funded by user fees paid by manufacturers that are being regulated. Today, close to 45% of its budget comes from these user fees that companies pay when they apply for approval of a medical device or drug. Changes in more recent years have also increased the number of standard new drug applications approved the first time round by the FDA from 38% in 2005 to 61% in 2018. In diseases where there are not many medication options for patients, 89% of new drug applications were approved the first time round. While the number and speed of drug approvals have been increasing over time, so have the number of drugs that end up having serious safety issues coming to light after FDA approval. In one assessment, investigators looked at the number of newly approved medications that were subsequently removed from the market or had to include a new black box warning over 16 years from the year of approval. These black box warnings are the highest level of safety alert that the FDA can employ, warning users that very serious adverse events could occur. 21% of medications were removed or had a new black box warning. Some potential reasons that more adverse effects are coming to light after the drug approval include senior FDA officials overturning scientists' recommendation and a lower burden of proof for medication approval. A Yale-led study showed that nearly 1 out of every 3 drugs approved by the FDA have a new safety issue detected in the years after approval. The FDA is increasingly greenlighting expensive drugs despite dangerous or little known side effects and inconclusive evidence that they curb or cure diseases. As patients or their insurers shell out tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars for unproven drugs, manufacturers reap a windfall. For them, expedited approval can mean not only sped up sales, but also if the drug is intended to treat a rare disease or serve a neglected population, FDA incentives worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Instead of a regulator and a regulated industry, we now have a partnership, said Dr. Michael Carome, director of the Health Research Group for non-profit advocacy organisation Public Citizen. That relationship has tilted the agency away from public health perspective to an industry-friendly perspective. The FDA also increasingly allows drug makers to claim success in trials based on proxy measurements instead of clinical outcomes like survival rates or cures, which take more time to evaluate. In return for accelerated approval, drug companies commit to researching how well their drugs work after going to the market, but these post-marketing studies can take 10 years or longer to complete, leaving patients and doctors with lingering questions about safety and benefit. Industry also sways the FDA through a less direct financial route. Many of the physicians, caregivers, and other witnesses before FDA advisory panels that evaluate drugs receive consulting fees, expense payments, or other remunerations from pharma companies. What might be called pay-later conflicts of interest have gone largely unnoticed and entirely unpoliced. In examining compensation records from drug companies to physicians who advised the FDA, the journal Science found widespread after-the-fact payments or research support to panel members. Among the investigation's key findings over nearly a 4-year period of 107 physician advisors who voted on the committees science examined, 40 received more than 10,000 in post hoc earnings or research support from the makers of drugs that the panels voted to approve. 26 of those gained more than $100,000 and 6 more than $1 million. The FDA says its rules, along with federal laws, stop employees from improperly cashing in on their government service. But Science, that journal, found that employees at the agencies often reap later awards, jobs or consulting work from the makers of the drugs. In 2016, a study found that 15 of the 26 employees who left the agency later worked or consulted for the biopharmaceutical industry. Of the more than $24 million in personal payments or research support from industry to the 16 top earning advisors, 93% came from the makers of drugs those advisors previously reviewed. These agencies being funded by the corporations that they're meant to be assessing and regulating is a farce. If you want a better world, demand that that stops. Demand that lobbying stops. It's not impossible to change the world. It's just the people that benefit from it staying the same tell you that change is impossible. That's all that's happening.
And then there's the big pharma lobby, which happens to spend way more money on lobbying Congress than any other industry, which of course helps them profit even more. In 2003, they successfully lobbied Congress to deny Medicare the ability to negotiate drug prices. So Medicare, and in turn all of us, pay more. Big Pharma is so lucrative, in fact, that companies like Pfizer can afford to pay billions in fines for promoting drugs that aren't approved as safe. And despite what CEOs like Shkreli say, companies often spend more on marketing their drugs than on research and development, sometimes twice as much.
If the status quo remains, it is a win for the pharmaceutical industry and it is a loss for consumers.
Good Morning America is brought to you by Pfizer.
CBS Health Watch sponsored by Pfizer.
Anderson Cooper 360. Brought to you by Pfizer.
ABC News Nightline. Brought to you by Pfizer. Making a difference. Brought to you by Pfizer.
CNN Tonight. Brought to you by Pfizer. Early Start. Brought to you by Pfizer. Friday night on Aaron Burnett Out Front. Brought to you by Pfizer.
This Week with George Stephanopoulos is brought to you by Pfizer.
This weather report brought to you by Pfizer.
Today's countdown to the royal wedding is brought to you by Pfizer.
And now a CBS Sports Update brought to you by Pfizer.
Meet the Press Data Download brought to you by Pfizer.
This portion of CBS This Morning sponsored by Pfizer.
On how to find the hidden sugars in the American family diet. Sponsored by Pfizer.
They were all hell-bent on becoming super rich.
Imagine a medical industry that's supposed to keep a nation healthy, but becomes so completely corrupt that it causes an epidemic. This has become a reality in the United States, where opioids have caused just under 50,000 deaths per year, according to recent figures. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Countless other lives have been destroyed through addiction. In the United States, drug overdoses are the leading cause of death in people under 50. That's a lot to take in, but imagine if most of this tragedy was caused by one secretive family working behind the scenes. Once again, this is a reality. That family's name is Sackler. The Sackler family is not only partly responsible for the epidemic, but has also made a multi-billion-dollar empire from it. You may not know about them, but you've surely heard of OxyContin before. Welcome to the story of how billionaires and doctors became the drug dealers that caused an epidemic. The Sacklers pushed OxyContin to everyday people who had little use for the drug. They corrupted the entire supply chain, employing armies of sales reps, paying off doctors, lobbying for favorable regulation, and making billions while masses fell into devastating addiction. They didn't care much for the addictive properties of their drugs, they were more concerned with their bottom line. The FDA even approved a claim that OxyContin's delayed absorption would reduce the probability of abuse. The FDA examiner who was involved in the approval of this claim left the FDA shortly and within 2 years had accepted a role at Purdue. Sadly, this move hints at corruption. In 2015, Purdue was granted FDA approval to market the drug to children as young as 11. Almost immediately after OxyContin was released, the cases of addiction became apparent. But rather than admit their drug was addictive, the company simply blamed people for not taking the drug as directed. Richard, who ran the Purdue company, and other Sackler members who have served on the board are still alive and being sued. All of these settlements seem like pennies on the dollar for a company which reportedly earned $35 billion in revenue from OxyContin and further fueled an epidemic which has killed over 200,000 people since 1997.
New data shows that more than 100,000 drug overdose deaths in the U.S. from April of 2020 to April of 2021, a 28.5% increase from the year before. Overdose deaths from opioids climbed past 75,000.
Between 20 and 25 million Americans had taken Vioxx, and between 40 and 60,000 Americans had died from the cardiovascular consequences of Vioxx, in the same ballpark as the number of Americans who died in Vietnam.
And what was the punishment for Merck?
But nobody went to jail.
So a small profit of what, $1 billion?
Maybe they made $1 billion.
Isn't that wild? Like you can make $1 billion from lying.
Merck's chief scientist saw the data from that first study where the 3 heart attacks were omitted, and there's an email that the Wall Street Journal published from March 9th, 2000, when they opened up the data on that. And the email, I'm paraphrasing, but the email said something like, "It's a shame, but the cardiovascular effect is there. But the drug will do well, and we will do well."
Oh, God.
For the better part of 2 decades, there's been a growing recognition that medical errors kill too many patients in the U.S. While exact numbers are elusive, a new analysis and estimate portrays an even grimmer picture. The new paper finds that as many as 250,000 people die each year from errors in hospitals and other healthcare facilities. That would make it the 3rd leading cause of death in the U.S., ahead of respiratory disease, accidents, and even stroke. Dr. Martin Makary, a professor of surgery at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, who led the research, joins me now. So how did we get to this number? What did your research find?
Well, we took the best available studies, the data from the medical literature, and we basically came up with a meta-analysis point estimate and then asked where would that fall if medical error were counted as a disease. It turns out that we learned that the CDC does not consider medical error to be a cause of death in listing our national health statistics each year, even though the point estimate comes right in between number 2 and number 3 on the list, which means medical error is the number 3 cause of death in the United States. We're just not measuring it.
Texas pharmacists are overworked, tired, and under the stress of staying open 24 hours. They stock 5,000 drugs, dispense 300 prescriptions daily, and make 2 to 4 mistakes every day. Nationwide, he says it results in 100,000 patients dying every year because of dispensing errors. The I-Team found pharmacists making mistakes at just about every well-known pharmacy you can think of. And Dr. Shepard says the reported cases do not begin to represent reality.
This doesn't begin to represent the number of problems.
No, because they're underreported.
Thank you for watching. References and links are down below. If you thought this information was valuable, please like and share. If you agree or disagree with anything, please respectfully comment. We all learn when we share and consider other people's views. Please visit dissolvingillusions.com for free charts, photos, book chapters, book audio, and more. Please visit movingbackfrommidnight.com, which contains information on my new book on the major environmental issues we face as a planet, including free book chapters, photos, and more. In this time of increasing censorship and attacks on free speech, please watch my videos on odyssey.com. Thank you and have a stellar day.